the hair is actually part of the scuba diving helmet. Has this little hat on. You just see a little bit of hair sticking out here, and there is like a reddish hair. And it had like little circles for cheeks, you know. It was basically like if a kid drew a picture of a clown, that's what this dude's face looked like. And it had wooden antennas sticking out of both sides of the head. So you had the cap on and then the wooden antennas sticking out of it. And its feet also had 3 toes. The hands didn't have 3 toes, had 3 digits, and they could see a piece of wood coming out of each leg going towards the ground. So it almost like it had stilts in its sleeves and its legs. Now you're thinking, okay, so this guy's supposedly close to 7 feet tall. It's probably a normal-sized human wearing some sort of stilts and something to make its arms look longer. We're going to get into some of the theories of what this thing is in a bit. But whatever it was, this clown, how it's often described, this clown looks up at the kids. The kids are looking down at the clown, and then the clown, in quite a clownish fashion, drops his book. He had some sort of book in his hands, drops it into the water, and then begins fumbling around for it. Oh no, my books. I mean, just in a ridiculous fashion. The kids are like, if this is an alien encounter, we've encountered one of the lame ones. The clown's fishing around for the book, finally gets it out, and then turns and begins moving from the kids. Now, this is something we've talked about in a previous episode. It was the one about the UFO encounter in Finland where the lumberjack chased the alien with a chainsaw. Just like that story, this clown, as it moved, it was taking these long, slow leaps like an astronaut does on the moon. So some sort of gravitational difference between where it's used to going and where we are here now on Earth. And it eventually just kind of bounces away and the kids are following it at this point because they're idiots and they want to know what this thing is, and it disappears. They can't find it. And they're like, well, that's enough for that adventure, I guess, is what they both say, because they've just lost track of them. And then they hear the siren sound again, but much, much louder, to the point that it freaks the boy out and he takes off. And the girl is scared too, and she starts to move away. But then she sees the clown pop up from behind some bushes, and he's holding a microphone attached to a speaker. So like a little portable karaoke machine. And he puts the microphone to his mouth and he goes, "Are you still here?" And she said it sounded like someone was talking through a mask. Like she could understand what it was saying, but it sounded like its voice it sounded like someone talking through a Halloween mask. And so she pauses when she hears that. And the clown looks at her. The boy totally kicked bricks out of here, but he's watching it from a distance. So the clown slowly lumbers up to the little girl, has his book still, he opens it up and he writes in the book and he shows it to her. And in the pages, what he had written was, "Hello, and I am all colors, Sam." So at this point, the boy's like, well, my friend's not getting devoured by this creature, not getting pissed on either. So he comes back, and now they're both standing next to this clown, and they begin asking him questions. The first question, the most obvious question the little girl asks is, "Are you human?" And Sam goes, "No." Two kids look at each other, they're like, this is getting really weird, really quick. Next question the girl asks is, the best follow-up, "Are you a ghost?" Now, it's funny because I think when people hear this story, when I hear this story, I immediately assumed alien. But to a 7-year-old kid in 1973, that may not be the first question you ask. I think ghost would be something more that little kids would be knowledgeable about. Like, if you're not human and you're weird, you must be a ghost. Anyway, she goes, "Are you a ghost?" And he answered, "Well, not really. But I am in an odd sort of way." And then she goes, the most general question you can ask, "What are you then?" And Sam looks down at the girl and says, "You know." Sam tells the kid, those are all exact quotes those are the exact question and answer. Sam goes on to tell the kids that there are more like him on Earth. And that he's afraid of humans. He's afraid that they are going to hurt him. But no matter what happens, he will never hurt a human. Kids are like, heard that one before. Do not believe you. No, the kids actually do believe him. They're like, "Oh, yay, Mr. Sam says he's not going to hurt us." Then Sam goes, Do you want to see where I live? I didn't plan it this way. Both of these stories involve children and adults and or tall people. I didn't even plan it. The peeing story just popped up this morning. But Sam goes, you want to go see my house? Now these kids go, yes, let us go see your house, Sam. So he takes them off to where there's this part of this field. And there is a shed. It's described as like a shed or a hut type of thing, but basically it is a 2-story domicile, and the opening is like a flap. So they all go into this house, and it's described as having the 2 stories, and they can see both of them, so I think there's a loft. They said on the bottom floor there's a bunch of like rough made wooden furniture, like a wall that had some dials on it, and a heater, like a portable heater. So basically a hobo's hovel, a drifter's domain. This is not a high-tech spaceship. And when I'm reading the story, and when you're listening to the story, you're probably like, oh great, where is this story going? Is it a weirdo in a mask? Is it an alien? Is it a ghost? We will continue. So they all go into his house, and he says, oh, it's so funny because he realizes that this was in the story, that he realizes the kids are not impressed by his house. So he said, oh, this is just a temporary house. I have a way bigger one. Super nice house in England that I spend all my time in. This is just a temporary house. And the kids are like, heard that one before too. He could tell they weren't impressed by the house, so he tried telling them he had a nicer house. He also told them he has a girlfriend in Canada that they'll never meet. But the kids basically are still peppering him with questions. And he says, well, I drink water, which I was weird that this didn't even come up in conversation. When's the last time you were talking to someone? They're like, hey, did you see the game last night? And you're like, I drink water. But he tells them, I drink water, but I have to cleanse it first. I have to do this, like, processing for it. And the kids are like, okay. And he goes, I also eat berries. That's why I was down there. I was picking berries. And the kids are like... Now, it's weird because his mouth has not been moving this whole time. Like, it looks like he's wearing a mask. You know what? I'm going to eat a berry right now. Now, what do you think the next course of action is going to be? This is where you're like... This is where I was thinking, okay... There's 2 ways you can eat a berry. You can eat a berry in a way that exposes you as a hobo drifter, or you can do what's coming up. He then takes a berry. He's like, oh, look at it, delicious berry. And he sticks it in his ear, okay? He sticks it in his ear. And then he leans forward really quickly, and then he's standing back up, and the berry is visible in the eyeball. So he has that triangle hole for both eyes, 2 triangle holes. And you can see the berry. They saw the berry kind of bouncing around in there. He leans forward again really quickly. He stands up, and now the berry they can see in the mouth gap, and then it disappears like he ate it. And at that point, there's many points in the story where I would have ran away. But at that point, I would have been like, okay, it's definitely not hobo. Hobos can't do that. Now, it could have been some sort of sleight of hand, some sort of magic, but they continue to talk to him. They are there for a half hour. Talking about stuff, and we don't have many details. What we've been told is that the kids continued to pepper him with questions, and he just gave off fairly vague answers. But after a half hour, the kids leave, and Sam's like, bye, and the kids take off. First thing the kids do, they see the groundskeeper at the golf course. They tell him, we saw a ghost, and the groundskeeper is like, you guys are idiots, there's no ghost. So sends them on their way. They end up going home and telling their parents. And it's funny because the dad's basically reading the newspaper. His daughter comes in and is like, Daddy, guess what? I had an encounter with a ghost today, and we went to his house and we hung out there for a half hour, and he has really bad furniture and a mechanical heater. That was kind of weird. Why would a ghost need a heater? But he ate berries in his ear. And the dad was like, totally was just like, my kid has an overactive imagination. I'll pick up that prescription tomorrow the shrink was telling me about. But as she kept telling the story, and he was also hearing the story from her friend, he realized the details were always the same. So he goes, I'm going to go check this place out, because my kid might be making up this story, and then I have to go pick up that prescription. Or some creepo might have had my daughter and her friend in a shack in the middle of nowhere telling them he was a ghost. So he goes out to where the shack was. It's gone. And they say that the soil wasn't disturbed, like there was never a shack there, and the people who worked in that area said there was never a shack there. Dun dun dun. Now that's the only sighting of Sam the Sandown Clown, is what it's known as. So, I looked more into this, and I said it's a little clickbaity, it's an interesting story, but I needed to see how true it was. Apparently, this story first appeared in the 1978 edition of the British UFO Research Association's Journal. 1978 copy of that. I wasn't able to verify that. They did list like names of the authors and people who investigated it, and one of the people who investigated it is the founder of the British UFO Research Association. So that's easy details to make up. The story took place in 1973. It was reported in 1978, supposedly, in this journal. The very earliest internet reference to this story was in 2018. January 2018 was the earliest reference I could find of this story. So that's a little suspicious. I'm thinking maybe someone made it up because of all the clown sightings and stuff like that. But let's look back at this quote, Sam. He's also said through the story that later on in the story he said his name really wasn't Sam, but like that's how he identified himself or some sort of weirdness. But anyways, hello, and I am all colors Sam was his quote. In August of 1965, we're going to Spain very, very briefly here. August 1965. We're going to Caracas, Spain. Juan and Isabel Dominguez, they are walking through the countryside from a nearby village to their home. They had just bought a bunch of peaches. Taking them home, going to have peach pie and peach cobbler and peach a la mode, which is just a peach. Just going to eat it. Or does that mean with ice cream? It doesn't matter. It doesn't. Yeah, no, it just means a peach. It doesn't matter, Jason. So, I'll have to look that up later. I'll Wikipedia it later. They're walking with their bushels of peaches, imagining all the great peach-flavored things they're about to have, peach schnapps. And they see something black walking near a countryside wall, like a garden wall. And then they hear a humming noise. What is going on? And that's when this creature stands up. 7 feet tall, but it was opaque, gelatinous, just oozing and wet. But it had a humanoid form, but they could just see it like throbbing as it moved around. And it turned towards them, and it had no face at all. And they could tell, though, that it was looking at them, and it began moving towards them across the countryside. They dropped their peaches and ran home, terrified of what they'd just seen. Now, if you were a gelatinous ooze monster, but you wanted to interact with people, you would need a disguise. If you didn't want to pulsate all over the place, you would find braces. You would get some wood to make it so your legs didn't buckle so much, so you would have the appearance of a normal human being. You would basically build an exosuit made of materials you'd find on that planet to keep your form normal. If people are afraid that you don't have a face, make yourself a helmet. But that might be related. That might be the creature that's underneath the Sandown clown helmet. Something truly alien that makes people run away in fear. But I have another theory. We've talked about it could be an alien, it could be a demon, it could be a spirit. It could be all three, it could be none of them, it could be something totally different. Because all of those theories have been bandied about. But what if it's something darker than that? People have a fear of clowns. It's one of the most popular fears. And it's one of those things that people can never really point to why they're afraid of it. There's been lots of theories from a cultural aspect because people use faces to determine intent, so when the faces are exaggerated, it's hard to determine intent. Cultural factors like serial killers dressing as clowns like John Wayne Gacy, horror movies, but none of these really account for the deep-seated fear. But what if people aren't petrified of clowns? But when they see a clown, they're reminded of something alien. When someone sees a clown and they're terrified, they're not necessarily terrified of the clown. What if they're terrified at something the clown reminds them of? Not a horror movie, not a serial killer, not a nightmare, but something real. What if we cross-referenced people who have been abducted by aliens, experienced lost time, and whether or not they have a fear of clowns? But they don't know why they have a fear of clowns. They've been afraid of clowns since they were 8. They don't know why. But then when you look into it, they did have that weird time where they woke up in their backyard. Can never figure out how they got there. What if there is a connection between them? Because you're not really afraid of clowns, you're afraid of what clowns remind you of. Those people who took you away that night and then wiped your memory clean. I don't believe those two kids sat in that house for a half hour and don't remember the details of the conversation. I don't believe it was just vague questions and answers, because everything else is so detailed in that story. It's lost time. They're sitting in that house, and then they leave. And when people ask what you talk about for that half hour, they're like, just normal stuff. Because they don't remember.